Hi, this is Chris McCormack, Macca, and you're listening to the Physical Performance Show.
And the winner is...
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
Phelps with 10 meters left. 3 minutes too good. The crowd roaring. Freeman wins gold.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Listeners, welcome to another episode of the Physical Performance Show. I'm your host, Brad Beer. I trust you've been having a great week, and I hope you've been putting into practice some of the hints and tips you've picked up from the show's very generous guests as they've shared around the highs and the lows and everything in between of their journeys to physical best performance. You're in for an absolute real treat today. I'm joined today by one of my triathlon heroes from my youth, Chris McCormack. A little bit more on Macca in a moment. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode with Brittany Broban, Olympic silver medalist from the 2012 London Olympic Games. What a transparent interview that one was. Britt shared around the devastation of missing out on the Rio 2016 Olympic Games due to the shoulder dislocation that she incurred at the Olympic trials in 2016. And we wish Britt all the very best. If you enjoyed the episode, please jump over on social and let Britt and myself know. It'll mean a lot to Britt. She's now forging a career and changing directions into the world of triathlon. So it's very fitting for today's guest that we also have another triathlete on. So please let Britt know if you enjoyed the episode. A big thank you as always to you, the faithful listener. If it's your first time joining us, then I hope you really enjoy the program and you return your earbuds, so to speak, next episode. If you're back and this is episode 48 for you, a massive thank you, and I hope you continue to enjoy the program. Big thanks to those that have left reviews on iTunes. Reviews, as I say each week, really help this show stay prominent in the iTunes directory. And much to your thanks, the show has been ranking consistently inside the top 50, quite often inside the top 20 on iTunes in the health and fitness category. So massive thanks. Review-wise, thank you to this week to Morgan J91. And Morgan reviewed the program and rated it with 5 stars. Always something to learn and be inspired by. Morgan commented, I've been listening to this podcast habitually since I discovered POGO Physio at GCAM 2016. These interviews are full of great stories, information and inspiration for athletes at any stage. I've been running for nearly 12 months and these podcasts are a great listen during my commute to work or a long run. I've also been blessed with my favourite training mantras from athletes Brad has interviewed. Love your work, Brad and team. Can't wait to keep listening. Morgan Jane, massive thanks for taking the time to leave that review. And also this week, thanks to Brentos65, 5 stars from Brent. Fantastic podcast, Brad. You get some fantastic runners on the show and engaging questions. So thanks, guys, for leaving those reviews. They are warmly appreciated. And if you're yet to leave a review, it's as simple as jumping over to iTunes, clicking ratings and review. 1 star if you think it's okay, 5 stars if you really enjoy it. Either way, I'd be wrapped if you'd take the time to do that. So thank you to everyone doing that this week in advance. This show, as always, brought to you by, lovingly that is, by POGO Physio. We're the physios that want you to cross your finish line. And we do that through our industry-first, fixed fee, unlimited access finish line programs. There's 2, 6 or 12-week programs available, and they include everything from hands-on therapy through to active rehabilitation with state-of-the-art equipment, including the Alta G anti-gravity treadmill, clinical Pilates reformers, and also the whole body vibration unit known as the Galileo. So if you're serious about getting back to your physical best following injury, check out POGO Physio, www.pogophysio.com.au to learn more about the finish line programs. Guys, today we're about to jump in. I recorded this interview with Macca down at his home on the beautiful south side of Sydney, Cronulla, in the Shire there. And it was a real treat for me. Macca was an athlete that I really admired through my formative years as a junior triathlete. And Chris's resume is absolutely prolific. I mean, where do you start? I'm going to do my best to summarise, but obviously the pinnacles of Chris's career were the 1997 ITU World Championship victory at the age of just 23 in Perth. That same year, Macca also won the ITU World Series. From there, Macca went on to forge an incredibly successful career across the Olympic distance and other distances, vying for selection in the Sydney Olympic Games. Unfortunately, Macca wasn't selected in the 2000 Olympic triathlon debut. However, off the back of that, Macca went on to really a racing rampage, winning 35 consecutive races in the US and having an overall podium percentage of 89% from any race that he entered. Just remarkable. Macca went on to win the 2007 Hawaii Ironman World Championship, and then also to return in 2010 and pick up another Hawaii Ironman crown. And during this interview, we touch on, yes, all the racing accolades, but we also go from the genesis of Macca getting into triathlon, away from competitive running where he was so gifted. Macca shares around his father and the role that he played in Macca's formative years, and it'll be surprising to you how that played out. Losing his beloved mum, right through to a conversation that Macca had with Hawaii Ironman great Mark Allen in the car off the back of a did not finish. And Macca's very transparent on this. Macca also shares around how, as an athlete, not asking potentially hurt him, some of his earlier campaigns in the Hawaii Ironman Triathlon, right through to Macca sharing around his racing philosophies, tips, tricks, insights, psychology. It's a fascinating look into ultimate peak performance from such a great competitor. You're really going to enjoy it. We also touch on Macca being the first signed athlete ever for clothing and apparel giant Under Armour and the story of how that came about. And we also touch on the ever exciting launch in 1 week's time of the Super League Triathlon Series. This is a revolution in triathlon, and it's bringing to the fore the best triathletes on the planet, soon to hit Hamilton Island. So jump in, get ready for a ride and a half. This is Chris Macca McCormack. So Chris Macca McCormack, mate, I've been looking forward to this since we ran into each other last week, but well before that, once we launched the show, I thought Macca would be great to get on this at some point. So, mate, thanks for hosting us down here today in your beautiful home here on Gunnamatta Bay in beautiful Sydney.
Yeah, home away from home. This is the family home, but most of us, the entire family except for one, lives in Thailand now, which has been the last 4 years. But it's good to always come back here. It's where I grew up. And my daughter's at boarding school, so she's back for the weekend, and it's always nice to come back to Sydney.
So the Shire, mate, the Shire boys, hey?
Yeah, everyone cringes when you say that if you're from I'm a Shire boy, but yes, I'm actually an original Shire boy. I grew up here since... not original. I moved over here when I was 7 from the eastern suburbs, and learned my craft here, did everything here. It's a beautiful part of Sydney, and it's really grown up in the last 15 since the Sydney Olympics. Like it used to be a very, very blue collar town and very surfy, and in the last few years, it's just become the place to live in Sydney. Maybe other Sydney-siders may disagree, but the who's who live in the Shire. In my opinion. Even Dan Mack comes from the Shire.
Oh, Dan Mack. We're going to get Dan on the show at some point.
Yeah, now he's a Noosa boy, but he's an original Shire boy. He'll never get out of his blood.
Can't take the Shire out of the boy, hey?
Yeah.
Macca, there's so much to cover. I mean, your career's super accomplished and you're not over with it yet. I mean, there's new chapters. But, I mean, we'll talk about the Super League launch today, which is super exciting for the sport of triathlon. But, mate, in terms of your journey, obviously grew up in the Shire. You were a talented junior athlete. But if we just start at, the early days of triathlon for you, and then we'll run through the years and unpack a few things as we go. So, Macca, I mean, growing up, what did youth look like?
I grew up, we moved, my father was a waterside worker, uneducated, 3 boys, an older brother and a younger brother. I'm the middle child. And he was determined his boys would be educated. He was a very, very hard worker. He's amazing. My dad's my hero. He was the hardest working guy I've ever known. I think he instilled that discipline into all his boys. And sport was something we did on the weekend. He was all about education. So we would go to school. My mother was a school teacher, and he was determined to make sure that we had what he didn't. So, you know, I think it was through high school I grew up surfing. We grew up on the beaches a bit south of here, and back in those days in surfing, you used to have priority. You used to have to paddle out around a buoy, and you had the priority in the waves. And I used to always lose priority as a kid. So my father thought, well, you're not fit enough. Like we weren't very, you know, it wasn't, you know, we didn't really know much. So we just started running. My dad said, let's start running. And I found that I was a really good runner. I used to just run around the block, had my KT 26s on, and then through school I started winning everything at running. And it was just by chance we fell into this sport. Just naturally I was good at it. And, you know, by year 8 or 9 I was winning state championships. Year 9 I won my first national championships as a kid. And at that time there was a lot of hype around running. You had Steve Monaghetti as a big champion in the country. You had a lot of people coming through. And so I was approached a lot by the AIS to join their program. My father was adamant, no way. You run on the weekends, school, you're going to university, you're going to be a lawyer, a doctor, you know. And
How old were you at this stage, Macca?
Probably 15, 16. And, you know, you're starting to look at those things. Year 10's coming up. You can leave school at year 10, as you know, and you're 11 and 12, and starting to plan what we're going to do. And I had aspirations of travelling and being a runner and going to the Olympics. I'd watched the 84 Olympics on television. Yep. 88 had come around with Seoul, and you had Debbie Flintoff-King winning gold medals. And so you were sort of exposed to, for myself, that sort of differing sports outside of cricket and rugby league were the Olympics. And I remember vividly Bruce McAvaney on television commentating all these running events and going, that is me, I can go to the Olympics, I'm going to be like Robert De Castella. And by chance, one day, I think it was 1987 was the first one I ever watched. So I was, 15? And then again in 89, I watched again, this Hawaiian Ironman Triathlon came on television on Wide Water Sports. And because I was a surfer and, you know, anything to do with Hawaii, I used to put the VHS tape in and tape, you know, anything, running, surfing. Yep. And this Hawaii thing came on television. So I remember vividly sitting in the lounge room with my mother and my brothers saying, I could do this. And both my brothers like laughing at me, right? And that was sort of the first time I was ever exposed to triathlon, and I saw it, and it sort of went in the back of my head. But back then, like I try and tell it to a lot of the junior kids now, it didn't exist. Yeah. You know, like triathlon was sort of this thing that other people did. It was like a ultra running now. It was so far away, right? And the first time I actually saw a race was in 1990. I was in my final year at school, and a great running friend of mine had decided to do triathlon. They were starting to grow up around here, and just by chance, the Sutherland Shire, had I not grown up here, I may never have done triathlon. Yeah. Had Greg Welsh, McKeely Jones, these iconic people who went on to be some of the greatest of all time, trained and lived here. So you were exposed to them on a daily basis. In my running club, they were like, that's Greg Welsh, he's a triathlete. And so I used to see him. They had cool glasses, and runners didn't run with glasses on back then. Like it was just, they shaved their legs. And by chance I saw an event and thought I could do that, and opted to enter event in 1991, my first race. I did a duathlon and won it as a junior. And then 92, I did my first ever triathlon at the Daihatsu series down in Wollongong. I was 18 years of age, 19 years of age, and it went from there. I was good at it. I recall vividly all the juniors were at this event. Back then it was the Cadbury Junior Elite Series. You qualified as a junior as a Cadbury Elite, and the team back then was Andrew Johns, who went on to be an Olympian for the UK, Brett Rashini, Rick Stapleton, a whole bunch of us, and I did the race. I was so far behind. I turned up with my father, and we saw everyone swimming in wetsuits, and we thought I went and put my foot in the water. I had no idea. And I said, it's not that cold. And my dad's like, it must be cold out in the middle. We didn't realise wetsuits were a swimming aid or anything like that. And so I put my surfing spring suit on and put it on, walked down. Everyone's looking at me like, look at this kid with his peak wetsuit. And I was so chafed. I was so far behind in the swim. I got out, I got on the bike, I rode around, and then on the run, I ran like 31 minutes and ran through all the juniors
for the
10K.
Yeah.
But I was like, and I ended up winning a trip to Noumea New Caledonia, first junior, and everyone questioned whether I'd actually run the right course. And they went from there, and that was basically the start of my triathlon career by chance. And but I recall when I made the junior team for Worlds, I did a few more races and was winning the juniors. My father was saying, "You're not going, mate. Like, you got university." I was studying a Bachelor of Commerce at New South Wales University here. I was on the Ben Lexon running scholarship. I was technically supposed to be running for the university. So my father was very, very uneasy with me doing this Mickey Mouse triathlon thing.
Yep.
You know, like, well, what's this thing? It's not even an Olympic sport. Like, what is it?
Yep.
And I kept thinking, Dad, there's $500. You know, like I won this race, I won $500. Like, I was working at Sizzler in the city, $70 a week. I'm like, $500, I'll be rich. And that was sort of the beginning of the beginning of it all.
Professional
The
career.
beginning of it all. It's amazing when you look back. It seems not that long ago. And it was a very different looking sport, but a beautiful time for sport in Australia and all those type of sports, the Uncle Toby's Super Series and all that. And by chance, the Formula One started, Brad Bevan, and it all went from there. It was just, I think a lot of it was timing, you know. And
Well, it's amazing, Macca. I feel like listening to you talk, it's almost like I did my youth, you know, from 10 to 19 through that. Not in it, but looking at you guys as the the heroes of that was our aspiration growing up. The guys that were into multisport. I mean, I got into the sport in 1990 as an 11-year-old. Did the Grafton Triathlon, a 1:38, 1K swim, 30K ride, 8K run. And we used to have a good regional race there, and we'd get the tri-mags, and you guys would be in that, and so doing the journey sort of 7 to 10 years ahead of us, and so we grew up very much aspiring to be a Chris McCormack or a Brad Bevan or a Greg Welsh, or so it's fascinating to hear you today talk about deconstruct the origins of the sport and what it was like for you getting in, because Macca, from uni, I mean, you had your first World Junior 93.
Yep.
And I don't know the story, but doing my research for this morning, read that you celebrated in the finish shoot and it cost you a podium. What happened there?
Yeah, well, basically, I'd qualified for World Juniors. I was only a year into the sport, right? It was 93 August but you had to qualify in the Australian season, which was between November and April, and August was World Juniors in 93. So I was 92 when the qualification was happening, and I remember getting contacted by Triathlon Australia and said, "Mate, we want to put you in the junior team. You've been the number one junior." I was doing all the races. And my father's first response was, "You're not going anywhere, right? You got university to finish. August is in the middle of university." I'm like, "Dad, I've never been to Europe, I'm like, "It's in the UK." He's like, "I'm not paying for you to go to the United Kingdom." He's like, "No, Dad, they pay, man." And that was a big thing. And then I remember vividly flying over, and one of the guys we've got coming out, Spencer Smith, went up to win the elite race that year. But for me, it was just a journey. So I never imagined I'd be competitive at a world championship. And it was non-drafting back then, very different looking. And I had a fantastic swim. It was a wetsuit swim. I'd been training really, really heavily here with Dick Kane. I got out in just off the front group. And on the bike, I was always very strong on the bike. I don't know why. I think I was a bigger guy. And I remember moving up with a guy called Olivier Marceau, a French guy who went on to win Worlds in 2000, and a guy called, who was second that day, Alexandre Manzan, and we sort of moved up through the field. And I got off the bike, and I ran, and I was leading this race with a Swiss guy, Olivier Hufschmid, who ended up passing away a few years later. And I remember running, and it was the first time ever I'd had a motorbike with a TV camera in front of me. I'm like, wow, I'm on television. And Olivia dropped me on the run, and I remember coming into the straight, and it was 2-lap run, and you used to have to wear these bands to see you cross the lap. So I knew Olivia had the race won, and I was coming in, and there was thousands of people in Manchester. And I got caught away with it, and I remember seeing a whole bunch of girls and people, and I was high-fiving everybody. I was looking over my shoulder, and I didn't see the two guys behind me. I didn't think they had a wristband, and I went from second to fourth in the space of 50 metres because I was showboating, as Triathlon Australia called it. And that's still a story that they tell all the juniors. You always run to the finish line because this idiot junior from the 90s blew a silver medal, a podium, by celebrating too early.
With the girls.
Yeah, well, it's high five. Meet you tonight. It's going to be a massive
good
party.
lesson learnt though, right?
Yeah. No, but that was an amazing trip, watching Spencer Smith and Brad Bevan and Ben Bright and seeing professional triathlon in Europe. And that was what really the catalyst that wanted me to be a professional, because you'd seen it here in Australia. But when you landed in Europe with the UK system, and then the French were there, and I got offered a contract to go and race in France, which I took at the absolute my father was mortified because back then there was no mobile phones or emails. I remember ringing my father on a payphone saying, I'm staying in Europe. And he's like, what about uni? And it just hung up. I'm like, I'll deal with it when I get home. And he was mortified.
And you were, what, early 20s?
I was 20.
20.
Right on the bottom. Yeah,
20.
just turned 20.
Okay.
And went to France, raced for a club, Tricastin, with Max Fegan, an Australian guy here, and Jenny Alcorn was in that team.
Yeah.
And, mate, I just thought this is the greatest. You know, we're travelling around France, I'd never been there, and getting paid and living in dorms. And it was very, very cool.
And you had some early success, I think, 9 wins in your first season.
Yeah.
Internationally.
I was winning everything. I was just a good runner. I was a horrible swimmer, to be quite honest with you. I thought swimming would be a strength, but it wasn't as good as I thought it was. And I could ride well. I didn't have that strength over the 40K, but a lot of the French races you could do sprints, or they were quite odd distances, like 30 kilometres.
Yep.
So I could move up, but my run was dynamite.
Yeah.
You know, I used to, back then it was a very different looking sport because people migrated from different disciplines at that time. There were swimmers coming across, there was bike riders coming across. So the run, if you could finish with a big run like Welshie and myself, I could make a lot of progress. So I went around, I was winning French francs like every weekend, 3,000 francs, which is, $1,000, and thinking, mate, I've made it. You know, and I arrived home from that trip. My father was mortified. You're never doing that again. You finish uni, and I dropped out of the sport because the family blow up there was enormous.
You literally dropped out of the sport for a period of time.
I raced here in Australia, but there was definitely a feeling. Even though I was 21, my father is definitely the person in our household that we all listen. I guess I hope my kid's still the same way, but I didn't want to let him down. And even though I had all these dreams of grandeur, I always felt that maybe it was just dreams at that point. My dad was like, mate, you piss it all away and you'll do this, and it's about education, you setting yourself up to make sure you've got opportunities and options in your life beyond this. I'm telling you, son. And then so basically when I came back from that 93 Worlds, he was bitterly disappointed in me.
So as a young, obviously gifted, talented athlete, with potential there to burn, some success, early success, yet like every child, as we just alluded to, I'm a father of 2 girls now, you like to think that, they're wanting to, not for the parents' sake, but for their own development, follow their parents' best intentions.
Yes.
What was the battle like in your head? At one point were you kind of like, Macca, like, oh, geez, I'll put this down and follow my dad's... It
was an enormous battle because, sport looked very different back then in Australia. You either played rugby league and cricket was... You're a cricketer, but no other professional sport really existed. So to talk about professional triathlon in the way that kids can talk about it now is like talking about being a professional Spartan racer. You know what I mean? In today's scene, like people are like, "You what?
Yeah.
You're quitting everything to do Spartan?" Or so and so it looked very different. So my father just had it was like, stop being ridiculous.
Yep.
I'd be like, yeah, but Dad, in France it's this and this. So it was a constant battle because I believed in the sport and I'd always felt I'd done everything right. And so for me it always looked like finish university, then I'm on my time. I'm an adult. It's a struggle. You're 20. I'm not a kid.
Yep. And you did finish.
And I finished university.
Your degree was what, economics?
Yeah, Bachelor of Commerce. Majored in accounting. And then I literally finished university. My dad's first thing is, job. I had a job within 2 weeks at Bankers Trust. And I really had I remember thinking far out. Like I'm finished university in November. I was working. I started work at mid-December at Bankers Trust through a connection, and I was basically making coffees and that at BT in the city as in funds management.
Right.
I look at it now. A lot of people are like, "Wow, is it?" A lot of those guys have gone on to be superstars, made a lot of money, but I wouldn't have traded it for the world. It just wasn't for me, And
Macca, I know that you're very close to your mum, obviously your late mum. And how did your mum fit into the dynamic of channeling young Chris McCormack's energies and talents at that stage? Was your mum sort of supportive of fulfilling your potential, or was your mum sort of like aligned with your father in terms of?
Mum, I think like all mums, mum was the go-to person to soften the disappointment on my side. Dad doesn't understand, but there was never a split in them, right? They were very, you know what your father's like, and he's got your best interests at heart, and sweetie, you should pursue that. You should keep training and do it, but You know, she was very, very soft, but I always felt there was an understanding. Not that I make my father sometimes sound like an ogre, and he was not at all. Yeah. He was just, he had his path, and he was determined, and he was successful in that. All his boys finished university, all of them were, and I think as a father, that's what he wanted for his boys, and he feels like he did the right thing by us. And Mum was just a different personality. She was involved. She had 3 sons, so she fell into netball. She was the coach of the Sydney Sandpipers. Netball was her life, so she understood sport from that perspective. But again, professional sport wasn't a career path you looked at pursuing, especially in this space. So she definitely aligned with Dad in that sense, but she was very encouraging. You can be the best in the state, or you can be the best in Australia. That's great. I'm like, Mum, I want to be the best in the world, man. I want to be like Robert de Castella, you know, like.
And what was your mum's response when you'd say that? She'd be like, "That's nice, sweetie.
That's beautiful. Yeah. You keep those ambitions going, but back to university."
So where do you reckon you got your mix of your endurance sporting genes from, Macca? Like, if you had to percentage it out, Mum and Dad.
Well, it depends who you talk to. Good. Dad claims they're his, and Mum claims they're his. I think, my mother's a Maori, so she's a Kiwi, so there's a lot of talk about maybe it's that Polynesian blood, but I don't know. I think the great thing about triathlon, and maybe that'll change with time, but it's very, very difficult to be a natural at that, because it's very difficult to find an athlete who is a natural swimmer, natural biker, natural runner. So that's where I think what I liked about this sport more than any other sport is that it's very blue collar. What you put in, what you get out. So hard work can trump talent every single time. So, you know, I met some of the most amazing athletes in my life. If you remember back in the day, Benjamin Sanson, if that guy could run. Yeah. And everyone used to say, if only he can run. Well, he can't. You know, that's what's beautiful about triathlon. He can't run. And that's what made it fantastic. He's the gifted swimmer, very good biker. Yep. Unfortunately, not gifted on the run. And that is slowly changing with the draft legal racing, and you get guys like the Brownlees and Gomez and that are very, very balanced. But still, I still believe that there is an entry in to everyone out there, because being naturally gifted and talented at 3 sports is very, very difficult to be. So you can refine things and get to the top and get into that world level, where in single discipline sports you may not be able to do that as easily. Yeah, it's interesting. On the beach this last weekend down here, speaking to one of the radiologists from the Gold Coast, and they've now got MRI technology where you can actually MRI for slow twitch to fast twitch ratios, so you can get the juniors, and you can actually say, without doing muscle biopsies, look, clearly there's not much fast twitch fibre in your muscle bulk, so endurance sports or nothing. So there's actually some incredible technologies coming through. It's changing day and day. Back in the day, it was go and run around the track, and you're not fast enough. So it's changing. So Macca, there's a lot to cover. I'm just going to try and get through chronology and then get into some of your training racing philosophies. But Macca, 97, I recall vividly watching on channel, whatever it might have been, Channel 10, the 1997 World Triathlon Championships in Perth on the Swan River there. A beautiful race. Which I remember you taking the win, and you had your tri-top slightly, unzipped, and it was so, lean and fit. I think that's one of the characteristics of your racing years. Yeah. Your ribs emancipated. Your ribs are showing, and I think as juniors we used to try and emulate that. We'd unzip the top of our singlets then, and we'd try and have the Macca sort of rib showing. But mate, that was a significant win, right? So that was your first World Championship win. Yeah, first World Championship. What, from that first race at university, university years, that first junior race, then finishing your degree, what transpired over those years to get you to a point where you were, world champion 1997 at the age of, it would have been 23. I remember vividly sitting on a train in beginning of 95. I was 9 months into my job, packed train here in Sydney, 7:30 in the morning. It was pouring down rain, middle of winter, coming up to winter, and I thought, this is not for me. Like, I cannot do this for the rest of my life. And I remember getting to school, to work, and a guy I used to sit next to, his name was Brian. At the time, he was the oldest person I'd ever really hung out with outside my parents. He was 40, which is young, right? But he had a picture of his family on his board above his desk. And I used to sit next to this guy, and I used to look across and think, in 20 years, that's me. That's what I got. I get to move from this desk to that. That's what my life looks like. And I decided to quit my job on the train. I said, no, that's it. I'm done. I'm taking control of my life, and I'm going to be a professional athlete. And pay TV had just come out here in Australia, Galaxy, and I recall watching Craig Walton, a guy who was a good friend of mine, with Brad Bevan in a race called Drummondville, Canada, a World Cup event, and I'd watched them win. And I thought, mate, I can do this. I can actually do this. So I quit the job, told my boss. He laughed at me, said, "You're a dreamer. It's idiotic doing that." And literally 3 weeks later, I was on a plane, sold everything I had, and was going overseas. I did the World Surf Lifesaving Championships in South Africa to help them pay for the ticket, and went over. And in '96, I finished 9th in the world rankings. I won a World Cup in Drummondville, ironically, the race. And then was world number 1, moved to the Gold Coast to train with Miles Stewart, who's now the CEO of Triathlon Australia. Big change in my life, being able to have the opportunity to train with him and his father, because they showed me what professional triathlon looked like to some degree. And by the end of the year, I was, started 97, world number 1, won a few World Cups, stayed in contention and won in 97. I think for myself personally, I've won a lot of races, but that win is still the most special. ITU is the most competitive racing, but for me, it was the opportunity to show my father, firsthand. He'd never really watched me. All my racing was happening overseas, and I've been 2 years into this sport as a pro. I hadn't really come back much, and I was doing some of the Formula One here, but he still was a bit distant with, "You're a what? You're professional what?" But when he went to Perth, it's live television, 80,000 people on this course. We're going to the Olympics. It's and I crossed the line. I recall vividly, I'm world champion. I was blown away. Beat Simon Lessing and Hamish Carter, my idols, Brad Bevan, an idol. And the first thing, I cuddled my mother, and she was in tears. And I said to my dad, "Dad, this is what I do. This is what I do." And he's like, "I'm so proud of you." For me, it was just a completion of, I made the right choice.
Wow.
I could put that to bed, and it released a lot of, I think there was a lot of desperation in my racing back then. Wow. Because of that, geez, I don't want to let my father down, and that was the release that enabled me to free up. So it was a beautiful win.
So it's like a
validation of my decision as a young man to pursue this, and that validation with a world title at 23 and against the world's best. With my mother and father, it was the last race my mother would watch me win, like her last big race. So
because your mother passed away in what year, Macca?
Beginning of 99.
Yeah. So your mum and dad got to experience that, and a special day. Special day for Triathlon Australia, because as you mentioned, that was in the lead into Triathlon's debut here on our home shores at Sydney.
Yep.
And there was lots of, early talk about team selections and speculations. And, so leading into Sydney, as a junior, I was enthralled in who's going to be selected in the first Olympic triathlon team.
Yeah. I think we all were.
I think, you guys probably more so than anyone. I moved to the Gold Coast in 99 and started training with Bill Daverin, who was obviously overseeing Craig Walton's preparations. And, it was a bunch of you guys vying for the 3 spots. You were in great form leading into that. You were world number 1 for 26 months leading into Sydney. So, and obviously there was a well-publicised sort of, coverage of the selection. But as a young guy, you were 26?
Yeah, still,
26.
I wasn't that young anymore, but
26, 27. How do you've
I remember it vividly. Like that whole period, it was sort of a blur. My a lot of the time I talk about my mother being a big reason why I didn't qualify, and it's definitely not the case. There was a grey period or a black period for me where I carried an immense guilt because I'd left Australia in 95 and I never really came back, right? I come back and I remember my mother getting ill, speaking to my brother and father, and I never came back, right? Like I was...
Because you were over there.
I was overseas racing. I'm a pro, and this was my goal. I want to go this way. And even though when I was world champion, I'm now in Europe racing. I had a European girlfriend at the time, so it was my home away from home. I'd come back for 6 weeks to do the Formula One sometimes. In 98, 99, I didn't even do it. But I was living in predominantly Switzerland, and Mum fell ill, and then I was coming back through Japan, and I won the first qualification race in Gamagori, which was Olympic qualifier, and I remember I was supposed to go to Korea for the next qualifier, and I rang my brother to tell him I'd won, and he was the one who said, "Mate, you've got to come home, mate. Mum's really, really sick, but she doesn't want to tell you because you want to go to the Olympics, right?" I'm like, "What?" And Bill was there, Bill Daverin, and I remember getting on a plane in Japan and flying back to Sydney. My mum had already been administered to hospital, and 10 days later she was dead, right? So I sat with her every day, and that guilt, the guilt was just consuming. I quit, and that was She died in April of 99, and I did not race all of 99 for the rest of the year. I dropped out. I stayed with my father, and I just felt this need to be a good son, you know, like I just felt this selfishness that I'd just been so consumed in myself, and I was world champion. I'm this big superstar in my own head, and I was really a nothing, you know, like I was, when the most important people were the ones I'd neglected. And so, you know, I call that the grey period. I didn't earn my spot on the team. I was beaten in Sydney by Peter Robinson and everything, but my head wasn't in it, you know, like, and I just to some degree expected, and it was a very messy thing. A lot of people didn't really race. Like I was second and third at both the trial events here. I'd won the first one. I thought I earned my spot, but it definitely wasn't the racer that I should have been. And I think their heads, but a lot of the selection policy was around what was it called? They had a disadvantage clause, and some people exercise that for whatever reason. They should have done it, but I never read the policies to my own detriment. I just thought the best would go, and they picked a great team. It could have been, there were so many good athletes, so I don't sit here and go boo-hoo. But I walked away pissed because I felt I'd done enough, but you don't rest on your laurels. I felt that the sport didn't owe me, but would understand my situation, right? And I was sponsored by that time by Rexona. I remember a vivid conversation with the head of Rexona going, mate, come back. Like, I understand your mother's passed away, but get over it, sort of thing. And so I felt like I was bitter and angry at everybody. Give me my time, and no one wanted to give it to you and they didn't have to. No one has to give you time. It's the machine of life, and the machine of triathlon and sport goes on. You either come with it or you're left behind. Yep. And I can openly say that now. At that time, I was angry about it. And when I got the phone call that I was first alternate, I was livid. I went, that's it, boom, packed up my stuff and left Australia forever. I'm like, I'm never coming back here again. And I was on a rampage of venom against them. I felt so let down that they took everything from me, publicising I'm the man, and then they spat me out. And others probably felt that way too, Brad Bevan. And that's right. It's at the time I was very bitter, but now you can look back. That's just life, man. You know, like it's just life, right? But at
the time,
it's
exactly.
everything.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, for me as a junior growing up, watching, you know, who's going to be the first Olympic team, the Olympic debut, it was everything plus some, you know. So Macca, so 2000 Olympics, you know, run and won and pass. You're in the US,
yes,
and you're racing with venom, and you're on a rampage of I think 33, 35 successive wins over 3 years. Unbeaten Alcatraz, escape from Alcatraz, Chicat Mrs. T's, everything that's there to be won, you win.
Yep.
At some point, I think it must be around then that you collided with Kevin Plank of Under Armour.
Yes.
So how did that, I mean, from my knowledge, Macca, you were the first signed athlete for Under Armour, you know, mega brand, we sit here in 2017, and from my knowledge, you were the first athlete to win a world title. Yeah. So how did that collision happen?
It's amazing that I can call him a friend. He's only a year older than I am, and as I left, at that time at the Olympics, I met an amazing woman who's now my wife. And when I didn't make the Olympics, I thought it was over. I was going to quit triathlon, and that's it. And, you know, I wanted to be with my dad and my brothers, and I was just going to move back to Australia. I met a beautiful Australian girl, buy a house, and go back to banking. That was sort of where my headspace was. So it was like, what have I got to live for if I didn't make the Olympics? And it was, you know, it sounds very melodramatic, but that's how I was feeling. And she was the one, along with McKeely Jones, that said, mate, you had all these sponsors that had signed you for the year after the Olympics, just in case I won. They didn't want to let you go. Why don't you take that money and let's move to the States and do the things that you wanted to do? You used to always talk about Chicago, all these races at Welshie, and that. You said, let's go over there. Forget this ITU stuff. Go and be a pro. So we did that, and I went on this rampage of winning, and I was like, wow, I'm still good. You know, to some degree, it's a justification that you don't lose it because you don't make a team. As an athlete, you can get lost in that a bit. And I started winning, and that fed the desire to keep winning. And then I realised in America, everything's about professional sport. And mate, there's TV cameras, and constantly I went, mate, I can actually say what I think here, right? So I was like, Triathlon Australia are a bunch of clowns. You know, and I used that venom week in, week out I thought every race I win, there's more chance to tell my story. And in 2000, like I said, I'd won everything in 2000 that year. 2001, after the Olympics, all the Olympians came over and said the only reason that Macca won 13 races in 2000 is because all the good guys were preparing for the Olympics. Now we're all coming in 2001. Good luck. So I decimated them all, Waldo, and made sure they knew it. And I look back now, I think, oh my God, I was such a spoiled little brat. And then it was 2002 because I hadn't made so many friends from my peers in 2001 because I'd spat venom to them all at every race. 2002, I won Alcatraz again. And we're all sitting there, and there was Waldo and Slessing and everyone over there, and I by chance sat down. All the pros were over there. I sat with my wife, and these two guys and another three guys were sitting there, and it sparked up a conversation. Age groupers, you know, that's what was great about American racing. ITU was just pros,
yeah.
But American racing, you had that age group element with a professional, so like Ironman is. And by chance, I sat next to these two guys, and we got chatting and about their race. It was their first ever triathlon, and they'd done Escape from Alcatraz, which is an iconic event. And I was talking all about it, and they were doing the presentation. And they said, and the winner, he's 4th-time champion of Escape from Alcatraz. He matches Mike Pigg's record, Chris McCormack. I said, oh, excuse me. Up I go, do my speech. Come back down, and these guys are like, mate, you won the whole thing? I'm like, yeah, I won the race. They're like, I can't. Why didn't you tell us? Like we feel like idiots. I'm like, oh no, it was just more about you guys, how the race was. I've done it a few times, and he shook me. He said, mate, I'm Kevin Plank from Under Armour. You know, I said, Chris McCormack from Australia.
Yeah.
He's like, you know Under Armour? I said, I've never heard of you. I thought it was deodorant, you know, under the arms. And the guy, Ryan, who's his business partner, was cracking up with laughter, going, Kevin, he's never heard of us. And so we sparked up a friendship, and the other gentleman with him was actually a venture capitalist, and literally we became friends, and I'd email him and go back and forth. At that time I was sponsored by Orca, and I remember reaching out to him. I went through New York one day, and I rang him and said, mate, I'm in New York. How far is Baltimore from here? He's like, come down. So I came down to Baltimore, went through his factory. At that time there was probably 150 employees. There's now 6,000. They hadn't gone public yet. They went public in 2006. And it was small and beautiful, and I said to Kevin, you should sponsor me. You know, like he's like, I'm going to sponsor you. And we sparked up a friendship, and I was their first ever signed athlete outside of footballers they'd given clothes to. Yeah. I was the first actual athlete they ever gave a check to. Yeah. And I remember coming back here, I used to tell people about it, I'd never heard of it. Now to watch what Kevin's done, he's the most inspirational entrepreneur, the most inspirational CEO, in my opinion. Yep. In the United States. The guy's driven, he has a dream, a passion, and he's the one who always actually says to me, Macca, don't chase your dreams, chase opportunities, because it's a big difference. You can be useless and dream about being an astronaut, but it's just never going to happen, right? Yeah. He said there's a dream that takes you to think, but opportunities are what you should pursue with vigour. And he's just become a mentor. Now he's so multi-billionaire. I sit there thinking, wow. Like it's an incredible company, and it's a company that's driven athlete first, which is what I like. The amount of effort and time they put into a triathlete. Well, they're a football company. I used to go up there, and they had me on machines, and they had fitting people around me and creating uniforms for me, and I was struggling with the heat, and is unbelievable. I don't know any other, maybe the other companies do it, but where I'd come from with Orcas and the triathlon companies, even the new ones today, they just stick a logo on someone. They don't really care, right? But these guys actually cared, and I think that's why they got to where they are today. They're an amazing company. Yeah,
what a success story. I mean, it's still unfolding, right?
It's amazing success. They'll be the first sports company outside of Adidas and Nike to break $5 billion, like in sales. A lot of these other companies have made it, but they've been owned by Nike in that while they've done it. You know, Reebok's been there, Puma has never done it. So $5 billion in sales for a new player, no one said it'd ever happen. Yeah. And it's all driven by one man and a great team around him. But all that team, as he says, they're his gang he grew up with. They're not, they're not the big CFOs, and he's got all those people under it, but his gang, his guys that bleed for him, that are passionate about it, lead this whole organisation and have taken it all the way to the stars.
And to think that's the gentleman that you were, casually chatting with after Alcatraz.
Incredible.
Isn't it? Yeah. I think life's amazing, the collisions that you can have on a day-to-day. Macca, so thanks for sharing around that part of your professional sporting life, and it's still an ongoing relationship that you have, right? And so Macca, Ironman racing, so you win everything there is to be won on the planet. I think you had an 89% podium success rate, which is just unprecedented, particularly in endurance sport. And then, mate, 2002, you find your way into Ironman Triathlon. Yeah. And from my knowledge, you won back-to-back, maybe 4 or 5 Australian Ironman titles right through. You're still in your 20s. Yes. And, you obviously through that also venture into dabbling with the Hawaii Ironman Triathlon, the granddaddy of them all, as you said, the one that you sat in and watched as a kid. I remember that as well. Wide Water Sports, VHS, like you said, Rewind. Wow, Welshie, So, mate, obviously, this is a well-documented story, but your first few outings in Kona didn't go as planned. Yeah. And then you obviously broke through 2007 for your first Ironman title. But, mate, I'm just interested in the psychology behind, your first year DNA, your second year 59th, your third year DNF. Fourth year, I think I was fifth or sixth. Sixth, yeah. Fastest run split behind Norman Statler, who set the bike record that year. And then next year you get the victory. What's it like persevering through those five sort of podiums, not an unsuccessful outing, but it's true. But how do you persevere with something that's so arduous? I mean, to listeners, put them in perspective. You would be in training how many hours a week?
Oh, I was doing big training, but I think it was 40 hours a week. But at that time, I think the sport looked again very different. I always say that, but there was no 70.3 series that didn't exist, right? So you either did ITU or Ironman, which is a mega jump, right? It's a massive jump. There wasn't this middle ground where a lot of the athletes are coming through now. Even Crowies and this came through this middle ground where they could learn a little bit about endurance. I'd done 2-hour races. Now I'm doing 8-hour races, and I think I actually went to triathlon, to Ironman racing out of a little bit of venom. Right, I remember sitting with Bill Davron. He was now the national coach. They did the debrief after Sydney Olympics, their failure. Here I am winning everything, back to world number one, Goodwill Games on the ITU level. Commonwealth Games were coming, and I wanted to make it to Athens, but I didn't want to leave the States. So I sat down on the Gold Coast in Nobby's Beach. There's a coffee shop, Three Beans, with Bill Davron, and said, Bill, I'm your best athlete again. I'm doing it my way. Can you put me in? I don't want to have to fall back into the fold. I want to go to Athens. I want to win the Olympics, but I want to do it my way up there. And he basically said, look, this is the structure you have to fit in, or sorry, I can't help it. Man of his word, it's true. I said, well, I'm not doing that. He shook my hand. I said, thanks. So there was nowhere else for me to go. I remember Bill said to me, Macca, this is your destiny. Where else are you going to go to? Ironman. He was training Jason Shortis at the time. I said, that's exactly where I'm going to go. Mate, he's like, you're going to do Ironman. And everybody at the AIS had said, I'm too big. It's never going to happen. I'm an ITU racer, power guy. I said, that's where I'm going to go, Ironman. And I entered, literally went back, rang Ken Baggs at Foster. Boom, I'm going to do Ironman Australia 2002. And, I think at that time there was 12 Ironmans in the world. So now there's like 70. I remember that race. There was Peter Reid, Olivia Burt, like the best, Thomas Hellriegel, the best of the best. It's like a Melbourne field every Ironman because everyone went. There wasn't so many. And I entered the race, and it was honestly the first 5 hours of Ironman Australia 2002 was the easiest. There was Craig Walton off the front, me 2 minutes behind, and we were just riding away from the field. I'm like, this is the easiest sport. Are these Ironman guys kidding themselves, right? And then I got off there. I'd never run a marathon in my life. First marathon. Waldo's up the road, and so it was a familiar thing for me, right? I caught Waldo on the run. Pat him on the back, we chatted. I said, come on, mate. It was about 16K. I was running 4 minutes. I said, oh, mate, this is easy. I went through halfway at Foster. Beautiful, iconic race, beautiful race. 76 minutes for the half. High-fived my dad. And I literally went over the bridge at Foster, which is probably 26 kilometres in, and I was gone, empty. And it was the most difficult hour 20 of my life.
Really?
Yeah,
that
unbelievable.
First Ironman, the back end of the marathon.
The agony that I went through, and if you watch the old footage, I'm walking down the finish chute, not because I'm looking over my shoulder. Man, I was gone, right? Absolutely gone. And across the line, I won. So you get caught up in the beating of Bernard and Hellriegel and all these guys. And I've qualified for Kona. Back then, you could qualify that way. And, so everyone's like, oh, you're the man. But I remember going away from that bruised, going, shit, I ran 2:57 marathon. I ran 100 minutes for the last 21K. How do these guys run 2:40? And I couldn't possibly hurt any more than that. That was the worst experience of my life. But I got to smile and pretend I'm the man, right? And so I was definitely wounded from that. And then I went to Hawaii. And when you magnify that and you don't have that endurance base and you don't have that ability to suffer, a very different style of racing. Suffering in an ITU race is gritting your teeth for 15 minutes and being in lactic pain, But this Ironman is like getting punched in the arm. all day, and then after a while it starts to become really painful, and then if it continually doesn't stop, it's horrible. And so I was just exposed in Kona, right? You can't bluff your way through Ironmans, right? And that's why I think you see the success of Ironman athletes being a little older. Their ability to suffer, they've got a little bit more strength endurance, a little bit more aerobic endurance. They're harder individuals. It's a different style of racing. And so I think 2 reasons. I was too young, probably. I was too underprepared. And I was at a position in my career where I was too scared to ask questions of people because I felt I was the best in the world. So I had to look like and present that I was the best in the world, that I knew everything. So I remember in Ironman Australia, I had 4 gels. At Ironman Hawaii, the first year, we had a 13-minute lead off the bike. Myself, Thomas Helwig, we were just bombing everyone. I had 4 gels, mate. Like I didn't. Wow. Yeah, I had no idea, and I didn't ask, and it's idiotic on my end. And every year, but you always find a justification yourself when you fall. I fell apart in Hawaii that first year. 13-minute lead, thought I had it won. DNF'd. Everyone attacked me. I went, well, okay, you're not allowed to not finish these things. Well, that's heavy. and then I was like, you find a justification. Oh, you know what it is? I need to get my nutrition right. So you don't really look at why. You just find you want to pin an answer on something, and that's the answer, and that allows you to sleep at night and go back to the drawing board. The next year, I walked to the finish. Oh, you know what it is? I haven't done enough of these. I need to do more Ironman. So then I went and did a few more. I did Roth that year and was second to Lothar. I won Ironman Australia for the 3rd time, did a few more halves, did wildflowers and that. And then the 3rd year, I was in 5th place. It was 2004. Going into the energy lab, it was Stadler's first year. It was the most horrifically windy. I'd never been exposed to winds like that in my life. It was back then. It used to be in the full moon in Hawaii, so it was a lot windier than it is today. Wow. And it was the end of October, and I remember running into the energy lab. Mark Allen was there with my agent, my sponsor at the time, Kestrel, and I was in 5th spot, and I just saw the car, and I just opened the car door and jumped in, right, as I was about to go into the energy lab, and they're all looking, what are you doing? I'm 30 kilometres into this run. I was in agony. I said, I'm done, mate. I'm retiring from this Ironman racing, and they're like, what? You're in 5th? You got to do it, mate. It's only just go down there and back. I'm like, dude, it's 15K.
It's like Mark Allen,
Scott Fairchild, my agent, and Preston Sandusky from Kestrel, and they're out tracking the race. Mark Allen at that time was coaching Peter Reid, who went on to win that day, or got second, and he won 2004. And in that car that day, I retired from Ironman racing, and I'm sitting in the back, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. And we're coming back along the Alihi Drive. I'm in the car, and I've got my head down. I'm on every magazine as the favourite to win. I run a 2:40 marathon in Roth. I was the favourite going into the race, 3rd time lucky. And we're coming up on this age group athlete who had crashed his bike, Chris Sandusky, Chris something, right? And he crashed his bike out 15 kilometres from the town. He had a broken bike on his shoulder, covered in blood, and he's running back into town, right? And I'm now sitting in the car, like I'm out, I've got a can of Coke, the air conditioning's on, the pain's gone away, feeling sorry for myself. And we see this guy in front of us, they do, and they pull up next to him. And I'm in the back seat, and they wind the window down, Mark Allen, and says, mate, you want to lift back to town? All right, he's like, what? No way. Like, this is Ironman Hawaii. No chance. No, I'll get back to town. I'm going to run the marathon. And he's glanced back in the back seat of this car, and he's seen me. And he's gone, Macca. Like, I'll never forget it. I wanted to slide under the seat and hide. He's like, Macca, what's happened? Like, the shock that the favourite for the race is sitting in the back of this car. And I remember vividly him, just the look on his face, like, how do you not finish Hawaii? And this is a guy covered in blood, and he ended up going to win the race, or not win the race, but finishing the race. And at the present, and I unretired, and I begged Mark Allen. I said, Mark, I need help, man. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm winning everything. The only race I'm losing is this one. What is wrong? You failed here 7 times. Help me. And Peter was winning the race. He said, I'll give you an hour of my time this afternoon, but you got to do a lot of things different. And sat down, and that he changed my life at that point in time. The next year I finished 5th, 2nd, 1st. So I count the first 3 years of my Ironman Hawaii, even though they're on your record, as me being too proud to look for help from people who probably were open to giving it to me, but I was just too proud and driven to do it my way and be the champion. And why would I need help? The only race I'm ever losing in a year is Hawaii. I'm winning all the other Ironmans. But Hawaii for me was a difficult one, and he gave me the advice that I needed to to start my season later, to fall fat in July, not be so lean. I was so caught up with that Australian system built by Brett Sutton on being skinny, right? He said, Chris, you need to progress into your weight by Kona. You can't be at race weight in February and hold that for a season. That's just too taxing on the body, and you're a bigger guy. And it was fascinating. A very, very simple approach, but I'd never thought of it that way. And we adopted it, and second, first, went on to win.
So the first 3 years were, an early apprenticeship. The next 2 outings were another bit of an apprenticeship, and then 2007, the first title. So what was going through your head, Macca? I mean, probably lots of things, but can you think of anything vividly running down Ali Drive there at the end? And
relief.
Relief. Was it relief?
Yeah, it was. As I was starting to go down I'd had my best ever year the year before in 2006. I still think it's the best Ironman I've ever put together. I was beaten by Norman Stadler, better athlete on the day. And I thought, in the past, every time I'd had a race like that, a perfect race, I'd always won, and I'd won quite convincingly. I had the perfect day, did everything to plan, everything went how, and I was beaten by 71 seconds. So I walked from 2006 wounded, going, mate, I don't think I'm going to win this thing. Like, I can't go any quicker, I can't do anything more. And 2007, the emergence of Crowie, who is, in my opinion, the most gifted Hawaii Ironman runner there is. He mightn't have the run course record, but this guy is a machine, an absolute machine. He built for this race. He loves hot weather. If you look at Crowie's history, the Malaysia races in his youth, he was always fantastic in heat. He's a brilliant marathon runner, in my opinion, the most efficient runner we've ever had. He's tactically very astute. He has the mongrel and I'm thinking, shit. And I trained with him for a lot of years, so I knew the character of the guy. And he's just come off the 70.3 World Championship. It's the first ever year of this. And so he's made the progression through this 70.3, learned his craft about nutrition. So all those hopes that an athlete's going to stuff up by not knowing how to go long, out the door. So I recall getting off the bike with this group, with Tim DeBoom, Crowie, and a whole bunch of Farris, a whole bunch of them. There was about 8 of us. I think young Lukey McKenzie was in that group. And Marino. And thinking, mate, there's 2 guys here who on paper are far superior runners than I am. And the only thing I have with someone like Craig is bluff. And if I can't go any better than last year, but things are going to plan. If I just put together the same marathon as last year, but bluff these guys, I can win this thing.
Bluff is in a...
Mate, I'm going to go out of town that hard. Craig's inexperienced at... If you recall, he came to Ironman. He got 3rd at Ironman Australia. He got beaten by Shorto and the guys. He ran a relatively average marathon, but then he went on to win 5 70.3s that year. Very dynamic running. He was the first person I ever saw that ran a 70-minute half. I remember thinking, wow, that's big running. And he was winning the big hot ones. He won St. Croix. He won the Florida races, hot, humid events. And tactically been very, very astute. And I had always been frightened of Crowie's run in my ITU days. He was never a really good short course guy because you could distance yourself from him on the bike, break him, and he'd run at you, but he didn't have enough real estate. In an Ironman, you got plenty of time, right? And in halves, he was dynamic. And so I thought, look, my only trump card here is he's heard the horror stories. Everyone's heard the horror, especially growing up here in the Shire. Oh, mate, you got to pay your dues, and it's so hard. Look at Macca, look at Welshie. So I'm just going to roar out of town and set a tempo that's like, mate, this is it. Like, get used to it and come with me. And because I think the only thing I could probably beat these guys on is if it's a fist, like a brawl. And we get out in those lava fields and we're all in pieces. I can muscle and guts my way and to the end. So let's get ugly, really. Let's make it as ugly as possible. So we went through town. The first it was ridiculous. We did the first 16K in under an hour. And I bolted out of town, and Crowie was right up my butt. Like, he was 25 seconds behind me the entire first 16K, which is unbelievable. And I'm setting this tempo thinking, shit, what if I can't hang on to this? And then as we went up Palani, he started to break, and my guys were like, dude, push, but you're not even at halfway. And for that kind of commitment to push in Kona, it was just sheer desperation. And I remember going out through the energy lab, and it was the first time I was going to get my chance to see him. And he made the turn at the energy lab. I was probably at 5 minutes on him, and I'd run it all. And I was in pain, but I wanted to look like another day at the office, mate. And so as he ran past, I said, come on, mate. And I pretended to look at my watch like, I've got you covered, pal. Back to, but I remember climbing up and the relief. I remember coming into town, about 6K from town, and I said to the guy on the bike, I said, mate, where is he? where is he? He's like, mate, he's 6 minutes. You've got it. He's way back. I'm like, oh. So then you're 5K out. I thought, I'm going to win. But you start getting ahead of yourself. And I started tripping over my feet. And I was like, oh, so I had to concentrate. But I celebrated that win probably as I went up the, like Mark and Dave Hill, 2.5 kilometres from out. I was in tears. And I honestly don't really recall a Leahy drive.
Yeah.
I was so emotional. I've done it. The monkey's off my back. I've done it. Like I'm Hawaiian Ironman champion. I remember thinking of the conversation I said earlier with my brothers when I watched this race. The amazing thing that goes through your head. I remember thinking of my mum. I remember all the promises I'd made her. I thought of my mate Sean, who we'd watched every Hawaii. I could quote you every Kona Ironman in history. I was the biggest geek for this race ever. And I'd proved all the naysayers wrong. Mate, funny, I remember thinking of Bill Davern, Bill saying, mate, you're too big for it. You'll never win Kona. You're like, shorter. It's a nice dream, mate, but you're this. And all the funny things that go, all that bubbles up to the surface. It's what you've been using, I guess, subconsciously to fight. Yeah. And it all comes up, and the emotion is incredible. And I crossed the line going, mate, if you remember, I forgot to take my sponges out. And so that was always my horror story. I came across the line with these man boobs because I was so caught up in the emotion of it. And I remember looking at the photo going, oh my God, I didn't take the thing. Oh man. And that was when I came home, that was my younger brother's like, you might have won, but you look like a chick doing it. It was my haunting thing, It was like, it couldn't be perfect. So it was a beautiful day. For me, I could have bookended my career there, really. Yeah. It was the culmination of everything. It was the race, I said, that got me involved in triathlon in the first place. It was that journey to that victory it was a hard one. I learned more about myself. ITU had been so easy. But I'd been so successful so quickly and relatively easily. Ironman had taught me how to be patient, character, mate, persevere when everybody's giving up on you. Yeah. You look at it now, it's just 5 years. You go, 2003. But they're years. You're living, right?
Yeah.
So people are starting to go, mate, this kid ain't going to do it, right? And there's a lot of people starting to turn their back and go the other way. And you have a good chance to look around you. So I remember in 07, those guys that were around me in 07, because a lot had left, were the guys that were with me for the rest of the journey.
What was the first thing Mark Allen said to you?
I saw Mark. I'll never forget it. I came across the thing. I was... the adrenaline thing. I remember crying with my dad, and I did it. And I walked out of the thing you walk through, and there was Mark Allen. And I just hugged him, mate. I just hugged him, and he grabbed me by the face and said, take it all in. Take it all in. I said, Mark, I love you. I love you, man. You're my idol. You are the great. You're just so emotional. You think, oh, mate, he must have thought. But I understand it. He's like, mate, enjoy it. Take it all in. Well done.
Wow, mate.
Yeah.
So a conversation. There's been some crucial conversations in your world, hasn't there?
Yeah.
I mean, the back of the car that year with Mark Allen.
Yeah.
And so Macca, then obviously, you're back there 2010.
Yes.
And there was a social media post that I think you put up just recently about, it was around this time of the year where you planned for that.
It was exactly yesterday, and I remember it vividly because it came up on Facebook. I was flying to Alabama yesterday to see Bob Babbitt, and what had actually happened you sort of win this event, right? And then you get caught up and you have to try and do all your deals and you get caught up in and having to secure everything, and you're sitting there and all your sponsorship commitments. Before you know it, it's April. You're like, and suddenly got to go and qualify or ratify again. I did that, I think in 07, I did it in Frankfurt. And then suddenly the race is on again. Like it's like that, I remember coming back and Crowe won. It was just gone. Suddenly you're world champion, then you're not, right? And I didn't finish in 08. I had a mechanical, and you're like, it's gone. Yeah. Like it's done.
12 months.
12 months. And it was no disrespect to Crowe. This sort of I was never good at putting words together, but I'd said, oh man, well done, but I wish I had the chance to race him. And that's sort of how the Crowe and Macca rivalry happened the year before I'd beaten him, and I could understand where his frustration might have been. It's like, hey man, I won fair and square, and I was never trying to dish it, but I was saying, mate, I just wish I got the chance to run. I never got the chance to run. And I had two girls, and my wife and I were talking about having our third at the time, and we were thinking of moving back to Australia, and it was just you're a family man now, right? And I was away a lot on training camps, and I said, look, in 2009, darling, I'll go back, I'll win Kona, It was like, it's Crowie, and I mean this with the utmost respect if Crowie's listening. I knew him so much. It wasn't as if it was a 26-year-old hotshot Javier Gomez kid coming. Crowie's my age. Yep. So I felt like it wasn't a new era yet. It wasn't a new wave of athlete. It was still the same guard. I just needed to get it right. And so in 2009, we went back to race, and I finished 4th. Crowie beat me fair and square, right? And I promised Emma that was it. 2009, I'll retire, we'll come home. We bought this house here that you're sitting in, and we'll put the kids in school. My daughter was starting primary school, and we're done. I'll retire from triathlon, and we'll go and do our things, and we come home. Because she was Emma was tired of being on the road, tired of living in away. Some people love it. My wife didn't. She was very private, kept herself very protective of the family. We tried to stay away from everything, and she used to cop a lot of flack because I'm a big mouth, right? But I was always a big mouth to try and create a character that was commercially viable. It wasn't. Yeah. I always saw it as a game. I'm like, you want to give me money to do something I love, and you'll give me more if I'm a character? Well, who do you want me to be? Sort of like an actor. Right? And so she took it very personally because people would, he's a jerk, and she's like, he's not, and he really isn't. So she was tired of it. And in 2009, I remember sitting on Oahu Beach after Kona, I finished 4th, and I'd retired. I probably went home, I'm done. I'm sitting there, and I was lying on the beach, and Emma said to me, "Are you going to be able to live with that, or am I going to be living with a nightmare for the rest of my life?" Right? I said, "No, darling, I'm done. I retire." I'm like, "Mate, I promised you that." She's like, "It's not what you promised me. It's what you can live with." Wow. Right? Wow, it's like you can live with. I'm like, it was the best I've got, and but Crowie had 2, right? And I only had 1. I'm thinking, and he was only for 3 attempts. I'm thinking, mate. I've done 7 now. Great. And I was like, far out. I said, no, I'm good. I'm golden. And then literally we came back here. We just bought the house. We're furnishing it. And I was out with the kids on the boat. And I came back. And then it's like, do you want to go back? And I sat downstairs here. And I said, darling, if it was anyone else, and not that I had anything against Crowie, but if it was anyone else, it was a young kid, I could deal with it in my head. But it's not. It's Craig. I've trained with him since I was a kid. I know his strengths and weaknesses. He just had a better day than me. That's it. He's not a better athlete, and that's what's going to haunt me. And she said, "Okay, if you want to do it, I'll support you. But this is how we're going to do it. We're going to stay here. You can come back and forwards. Can you do it that way? You can go to Kona. Prep will come up to Kona." And I said, "Yeah, I can do it that way." And we made that decision literally yesterday. Wow. And I flew to Under Armour in the States. I met with Bob Babbitt. We went to Auburn, Alabama, where we created the suits and looked at heat testing. And that was when if you ever watched the Bob Babbitt thing, I called everyone out. I said, "This is how I'm going to win the race. Craig's a weak biker. I'm going to attack in the winds." It became a famous YouTube thing, and it played out exactly that way. And it was beautiful because there was, at that time, there wasn't many guys left, right? A lot of people are like, Macca's a big man, mate. He's done. Rack off. Go away, mate. Go back to retirement. Have your kids and get lost. We've got a new crew we want to follow. And, mate, there's some venomous journalists out there that just went for me. And so for me, it was sweet. That's why on that Instagram post, I actually wrote, still laughing about it, because we still chuckle about it. Because some of the things I said at the press conference, some of the journalists I called out, and you said, and I quote, because it was basically for me, up yours, and I'm done. I'm not coming back here.
So you knew 2010 was you done. 2 titles, yes, done. Yeah. Done. But did you know at that point, Macca, that you would be throwing your toe back in the water for 2012 London Olympic Games?
Well, that worked perfectly because it was based out of Australia. So, it was ITU stuff, and it was a decision. We'd won 2010. Again, you got to make it commercially viable, okay? And my sponsors wanted more. They wanted me to progress. I needed to stay in the sport, but I wanted to stay in it on my terms now, And so when I sat here and said, well, why don't we look at the Olympics? I can stay in Sydney, stay with the kids can go to school. I prep, I fly up and back. They're only, it's short distance racing. It's not 40 hours a week training camps, and that was part and parcel of the decision. Everybody. I know you're insane. And at that point in our career, my life, it probably was, but I didn't care. It wasn't about, and that's why I went into the London prep with the Royals and these guys, and I liked the kids. And if I made the Olympics, fantastic, and I wanted to do it. And if I didn't, there was no bitterness. It was like, well, it was a fantastic journey, because I felt like for the first time I was content. I could walk from the sport, which is what I did, and I'm not I don't have to look back all the time. I'm the man, and please, I'm content with everything I did. I did more than I ever wanted to. I did it on my terms, and the London Olympics with my family would have been fantastic, but we went and watched anyway.
Yeah.
Right? So we all went as a family and watched the event.
Yep.
So for me, it was about them first, what they wanted to do, and ironically, doing that, I went on to win the ITU Long Course Worlds in 2012 because we went to Europe together as a family in the July holidays. But my kids on that London journey had got to learn under Javier Gomez and met and Alistair Brownlee. My two daughters used to argue who was the best. And now Javier's coming to stay with me this week. My eldest daughter upstairs used to have his picture on his wall. So it was very different with that nationalistic pride as opposed to professional Ironman, which is just very individual. You wear what you want. So it was beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful time.
Well, I was actually in the Sydney age group race, the Sydney ITU race that, was one of your first selection races. And so I finished my age group race and I had a 12-year break from the sport and came back, and then I'm watching over there. How's Macca going to go? So I was watching with fascination. It was good racing. Mate, in terms of it, let's do a performance round just to get inside your training philosophies and some tips for listeners. It's a bit like an interval session, Macca, so I don't know the last one that you did of those. But here we go, mate. The training session that you most disliked?
Always Friday mornings at Dick Kane, we did an aerobic swim set, 16 400s on 5 minutes, and I used to sit 4 or 5 back, so it was like an aerobic swim set every Friday morning. Anyone who swims at Cars Park here, and I hated it, but the problem, and in anyone else's world I wouldn't go, but Dick, the old swim coach, was the kind of guy who'd ring you, where the hell are you? So I hated Friday mornings.
Friday mornings. Most loved training session, Macca?
Long ride with the boys. I think that's the one thing I miss more than anything. I used to do it on a Wednesday or a Saturday, getting out with the boys, getting up early, 5:30, punching through, doing 3 or 4 hours, stopping for a coffee. Just the laughs, the camaraderie, the blow-ups, when your friends bonk on the bike, and you miss that. That was a lot of fun.
Mate, favourite pre-race meal?
Always lasagna. It's become my pre-race meal because my mother used to cook it for me, so always lasagna, yeah.
Who's the athlete, Macca, you most admire and why?
The individual athlete I most admire, Brad Bevan. I just think he's just an inspirational, an amazing mentor and role model for a young guy. He's not that much older than I am, but a guy of that kind of ability to be that calm and be that open with his time was amazing. And so I admire him immensely, and I admire, I guess, mate, believe it or not, Craig Alexander. To see a guy like him do he's one of the greats of all time in our sport, but he's a late blossomer. He was a very, very average junior, a very, very average ITU racer. I think he never made a world's team. Very average, but he persevered year on year on year on year, which is difficult to do. You lose a lot of great talent in those formative years because you're not getting those results. And you're talking about a guy who did not really win a major race till he was 27. He won events, but nothing of substance. And to go on and see what he's done, he epitomises the hard work and perseverance pays off. So those two athletes.
Wow, beautiful, mate. Mate, the athlete you'd rate as the toughest competitor over the years?
Simon Lessing for me, yeah. Simon Lessing, he had my measure without question, and not probably athletically, he had it mentally. I was scared to death of the guy, and he made sure that he instilled that fear into me on a daily basis. He was just a freak, yeah.
Is there a mantra you used to use consistently when you were racing, Macca?
Great things that happen to those people who make great things happen. Nothing comes for free. You know what I mean? Like you want something, you got to make it happen. It's not going to fall on your lap. Yep. And it's a mantra my dad gave me.
Wow.
Nothing comes for free, mate. Yeah. You've got to work for everything you have, and great things happen to those people who make great things happen.
Wow, powerful. Worst injury over your professional years, Macca?
I really never had one. Ironically, the only injury I had was when I came back in London. I tore a muscle on the track in Aix-les-Bains in France at the Australian training camp. I tore a hamstring. All the boys were there, and I was punching out probably the fastest Ks I'd done in a decade with Brad Carterfelt, Cameron Good, Mitch Robbins, all the Aussie team, Emma Moffat and that. And I was showboating a little bit with the boys trying to keep the thing, and I tore a grade 3.
What were your 1K repeats that day, Macca?
That day we were running 240s, which I hadn't done for years. And I remember tweeting out.
I think I remember seeing that.
Yes. I remember tweeting out, just did 6 1K because I knew the guys down in Victoria and Spain, Royley and all those guys, everyone was watching everyone's stuff. I'm like, just did 6 1Ks in 2 35s. And everyone's like, oh, crap.
I think I remember reading that going, well, Macca looks like he's in contention here.
That was all bluff. I was wounded.
If you could use one word to describe your racing style, what would it be?
Committed.
How would you describe being in the zone?
Being in the zone is, I wish I understood how to get in there more. It's one of those places that everything is slow, everything has purpose, everything bleeds away, and it's just time. It's like you control time, you control everything. Everything, your pain can go away, you've got a control of that, you've got a control of your rhythm, you've got a control of everything. I wish I understood how to do it more. And a lot of people, I've been in Thailand now and with a lot of people that meditate, and they talk about, I think that meditation and the zone is the same place you get to. People meditate to find it. It's definitely the same thing, and it'd be a great place to exist.
When was the last time you were there, Macca?
The zone. I think.
The zone. You're in the zone now, getting ready for Super League.
Yeah, Super League.
A different zone.
A different zone. No, it's been a while. I think the last time I really felt that zone was that Encore ITU Worlds 2012 with the Necco and the boys. I just found a beautiful rhythm, a beautiful place, and it was. It was sweet. I still remember it. Fun
question. Fun question and a serious one. If you could have dinner with 3 people, living or past, who'd be at that dinner table and why?
Living or past, I'd like to have dinner with Ali. I know probably everyone says that, but he's definitely a guy that I admire a lot. I'd love to. I'd have dinner with my mum again, and living or past, one more. Ali. Who else have I really looked up to? I'd love to, and I have had it. And I enjoyed his company, but I'd love to have a dinner with Steve Monaghetti. Again, he's just and there's better people out there, but Ali, for particular reasons on how he shaped his life and how he lived through an era where he was more than just a sports star, he was everything, the biggest celebrity on the planet, how you live through that. I'm not really into politics, so I'm not really interested in politicians. My mum, because I'd just give anything to have one more dinner with her, and Steve Monaghetti, because I just used to watch him on television, and he did so much for me personally, and as a just wanting to emulate him in every way, that I'd just love to have him there. And
did you have a contact with Steve? Like, was there any mentoring?
Yeah, I've seen Steve a lot. It's quite ironic because I remember the first years ago, I used to see him as a kid runner, so he was always from Victoria, and I was on national teams. I used to watch him go, oh mate, this guy's a man. And I remember watching him at the Edmonton Commonwealth Games get a bronze, and I watched him at the 87 World Championships. He finished 4th, the Wakahura one, and I watched him at the 88 Olympics. And then I remember being at a triathlon in Noosa, probably 98, so I'm world champion, and they brought him up to do the bolt, and he was walking through, and I was sitting there, he was with his family, and I was like, oh, there's Steve Monaghetti, and we went up to things like, oh, g'day, Chris, how are you? And I was like, oh my God, he knows my name, Steve Monaghetti now, oh, Steve, how are you? Like, it was like, wow, he knows my name, but it was just, I just liked everything about him. He was just, for me, it was that childhood hero to some degree of being a runner, and sometimes you want to thank those people. They don't realise the impact. And I think I've always felt that responsibility to young guys. Like, you don't realise the impact you can have without realising you're having an impact just by being and the time you give, and it's massive.
Well, that's a beautiful irony. So, I mean, and Monas, I mean, even now, he's still running his 16s for 5. He's just an icon, isn't he?
Oh, he's a freak.
Macca, if you could boil down for any sport, any physical performance, this show's all about people reaching best performance. What would be the one tip that Macca, if you could have one bit of advice across the board, you'd give to anyone listening to achieve their physical best?
Without question, focus on technique and biomechanics first. Remain injury-free and consistency. All the rest is fluff, right? The rest, all these aerobic zones and that, they're important, right? But biomechanics is key. Refining how you move, how you do these things, and making sure they're close to perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. A lot of people's mistake is they think practice makes perfect. That's not the case. Perfect practice makes perfect. And a lot of that involves working with guys like yourself, working with biomechanists, working with coaches that are form focused, and refining all those little things, and then laying in good technique, good things in that sense, and remaining injury free so you can keep that consistency. So that's massage, treatments, these sort of things. Because consistency trumps everything long term. You can have the best 3 months of training, you get injured, forget it, you know. So it's all about consistent work and building.
And, I mean, you were remarkably consistent apart from that hamstring strain on the track for your 2012
I was lucky.
campaign.
I by fortune, a very close friend of mine, Michael Gilliam, who's still in my life, he's working with us on the Bahrain Endurance 13 team, works for Sheikh Nasser. He was a very, very focused from a young age by chance on symmetry for me. And it was always, Macca, you need to treatments, massage. Back then, no one did it. Now it's very part and practice but I'd finish my sessions in 98, 96 even, like back here. He's treating me, stretching, boom, cutting, hip, releasing my hip. Yep. He's not a physio, but it was just always, mate, stand up for me, stop slouching.
Yep.
Like, you know, and you're a naturally, he used to always say to me, you're a naturally big guy, you're a Polynesian, you're top heavy, so you're always going to sit on your hips. And if you ever watch the way I ran, I used to sit very hippie, but I used to always stabilise my hips.
Yeah.
He was always drilling that into me. So it was naturally something that I did, and I accredit a lot of that lack of injury to that constant reminder. Vigilance, without question.
Yeah, brilliant. Macca, you have been up to lots of things in the last few years. Obviously, the Bahrain Endurance 13 endurance team, which has really taken multi-sport by storm with the creation of that. What were the origins of your intersection with the royal family there in Bahrain and, as you mentioned, Sheikh Nasser?
Sheikh Nasser. By chance, I think Sheikh Nasser is a young individual, potentially the future king of Bahrain. The royals in this part of the world are huge. They're like the royal family of the UK, and he saw a problem. You know, it's a different era. These young guys they want to do things. You know, they're not sitting there just being royals. They actually want to be actively involved. And he was the head of youth and sport and did a lot of stuff in his country. And he saw a big problem with obesity. And he's like, well, look, if as a leader of this country, if I can't, you know, diabetes and obesity is the worst in the world in the Middle East. If I can't do something about it by living that, then how am I expected to put people in play to do that? So he, by chance, took up running and then discovered triathlon and said, I'm going to do triathlons. And, mate, the royal families of the Middle East don't do triathlons, right? And he did it. And he did an Ironman. And then he started saying, look, we all need to do something. And I need to, you know, in this part of the world, we've been so vested in investing in sports that you watch. But that's the problem. You know, you can buy football teams, I can buy soccer teams, but it doesn't encourage the young people or old people to get out and participate. I need to invest in sports where you actually participate, marathon running. So he brought triathlons to the game, to Ironmans, to Bahrain, for all the right reasons. And in that journey through triathlon, we bumped into each other. We had a chat. He shared this vision and dream of his, and I was like, wow, it's incredible. That's exactly the reason why you do it. And we take that for granted in Australia, and that there's a fun run you can do every weekend. Wow. In a lot of these countries, there's not. And we talked about marketing his vision, and he said, we presented the option of putting together a Tour de France team, a triathlon team, and ultimately a Tour de France team. And he's very, very vigilant, very smart man. And he said, okay, let's start here and let's see how we go. He's gone above and beyond with the triathlon team. We've won everything, and all members of the team have become very, very close with the royal family there. And he just keeps continuing to grow. This year is the first ever team, Bahrain Merida. They'll be racing the Tour de France with the Italian, what's his name? Nibali. Yeah, Vincenzo Nibali. Yep. And just by chance, the right time. And he's a young leader, but he's a fitness freak, and he likes it, and he feels that responsibility as a leader. He's like, who am I to be overweight and obese and that, and then say, yes, we've got to bring change for health and wellness into Bahrain. If I'm not living it, then how can I preach it? And he lives it in every way of his life, and that's it's a huge credit. And
I mean, testament to the program. You know, the biggest names in triathlon are members of the Bahrain Endurance 13. So it's exciting.
Mate, he's a great guy, and you know, I'd never really spent a lot of time in Bahrain. I've spent a lot of time now. My MG that I talked about before now works in Bahrain for the royal family, helping implement a lot of these health programs for them, and they are driven to bring change and bring participation there and bring fun runs and bring triathlons and getting people, you know, in a culture that's not into running and stuff. Let's try and bring that culture to the people here, because if I really want to get rid of this diabetes and obesity within this country, I need to look at food, I need to look at participation events, and that's what we're doing. Watching soccer, they could buy the soccer teams and everything, but his dream was that owning a football team just encourages people to sit down and watch my football team. Owning a marathon encourages people to get out and run a marathon. Yeah. And it was pretty cool.
I recall 2015, I had the opportunity to do a bit of physiotherapy work with, the team when they arrived in Cairns, and he went well too. He raced solidly, so I was impressed. So
it's an amazing culture. I'd never had a lot to do with the culture, but it's incredible. And they're very, very, the hierarchy is very structured and respectful, and it's amazing. And I enjoy working with them.
Different culture. Macca, on another project, sitting here with the hat on, the Super League Triathlon. This only came to my awareness in the last few months, and a lot of people I see at the practice are obviously multi-sport athletes, and it's what I do, it's what I know. And and this talk started to come through. You hear about a Grand Prix series coming back, and Macca's behind it. And so there's been this slow building, not so slow, but groundswell of the news. And so Super League, Macca, as we sit here today, we're recording this early March, and we're only a matter of weeks away.
2 weeks today. It was 2 weeks yesterday, race one.
2 weeks yesterday.
Friday, 17th, 18th, and 19th of March.
So launching on Hamilton Island, and you mentioned some of the biggest names in the sport signed for the series. Origins of this, Macca, has this been on your to-do list for a while? Yeah, it's been something you don't just pop up an event like this. It came about really working with the Bahrain team and working with a lot of the professionals, and realising the professional landscape in triathlon was flawed. I'd never really existed in that landscape, understanding that, the top 5 guys make great money and can be a professional, but there's a lot of the rest of them are struggling to make ends meet. And what happens after that, right? And there's no net, there's no support, and a lot of people are like, well, it's not our responsibility to have that. And I felt the sport had been amazing to me. I'd loved it, and so I looked at it. A lot of athletes in particular, they like to complain, but I'm like, well, it's not my personality. I'm happy to complain, but let's find a solution, right? And that was my career, was that. That's the problem. How do I fix the problem? So I walked away and I said, okay, let's look at the business model of triathlon. Why is it not working? Let's look at the business models of the most successful sports. Right? Everyone goes, Formula One, that's all people say. But I'm like, okay, let's break that down. Why is Formula One successful? Why is UFC successful? What is it that they're doing that we're not? Yep. So a group of us got together and we started doing that. My business partner, Michael Dorst, who's the most analytical, intelligent guy I've ever met in my life. And we broke them all down, and we realised that, it's not hard to realise the business structure of Ironman is not built around professional sport. It's built around participation, which is fantastic. Yep. So as a professional athlete, if you're relying on them, if I was a CEO of Ironman, I'd be doing exactly the same as they're doing. Forget the pros. Tickle them enough to keep some interest, but my aim is to grow new participation at an amateur level to pay the money to get in. It's a participation-built business model. ITU is an Olympic-built business model, federation-driven, all built under the IOC mandate, which is fantastic. It's not really professional in that sense. It's prize money driven, restrictive because of IOC restrictions. So you can't really create a professional program in the ITU. You can create stars that can go on to be sole traders and make sponsored dollars, but that doesn't bleed through to 10th, 12th. It doesn't create a professional series. So we realised, I was talking about the old Formula One days, and to some degree that was a closed league. And when I say closed league means these guys are on contract to the series. I own everything. I own their uniforms, I own their media rights, I own their digital rights, I own everything. Because the only way to return an ROI, return on investment for any sponsor, is to own the TV, own the athlete, because I can, for the first time ever, put a logo on an Alistair Brownlee. I can sell that asset. I need to put it on television. I need to be disruptive to what the current status of the sport is, and I need to break it down in that sense. So we sat down, we went and sat with the big TV companies, we sat with Red Bull, and we asked, why is triathlon not on television? Because the only way to make a triathlon star, to inspire youth, is to get it into the mainstream media. And media looks different than it did in the 90s. Yep. You have digital media, you have And they said, mate, it's boring, right? They said, I don't mean to be disrespectful. This is Red Bull.
Red Bull and Fox. They're like, yeah, we'll put it on, but they put it on at 1 at night because, mate, whilst you love it, it's pretty bloody boring, right? And I don't really want to watch guys that are 50 doing it. It's a nice story. I'll put the Hawaiian one on every year, you know? And so we looked at a model where the winter biathlon within Europe had relaunched and revamped everything they'd done. They changed the formats. They went against a lot of things and made it for TV, made it a sports entertainment piece first. And so we came up with the Super League concepts, many that had been done before. And ultimately we went about and started shopping this business model. So I was flying around the world in January of last year and talking to people that were looking at buying Ironman, talking to people who are investing in sports, speaking with IMG, without trying to lose control. And we raised capital. We found there's a lot of people within this sport that have a really, really good intentions, but I feel like a lot of the old brigade of triathlon are happy to keep it in that box because, well, it wasn't like that in my day, so it shouldn't be like that for you guys. It's like, mate, I'm hoping Aaron Royal can be racing for $1 million every weekend. I'm hoping Jake Birtwistle is as big a name as Roger Federer. Why aren't we aspiring to that? Why is everyone just happy to live off the crumbs? It's just not my personality. And so Leonid, our business partner, came aboard. He's a triathlete himself. He's existed in this sports team space. He invested a lot in this space, and he loved it. He's like, Chris, this is game changing. Can you do it? I said, well, yeah, I need this, and this, and we can do it. And so we went about in April of last year, so almost a year, and started contacting athletes. Of course, everyone's, oh, mate, I've heard it all before. I'm like, boom, money talks, right? And then we secured a lot of them. And then athletes, the mindset of a lot of the athletes is desperation. Take what you can now because it mightn't be there tomorrow. I'm trying to sell them on the, look, understanding I'm here to try and help. There's no guarantee here, but we've got solid funding, we've got solid commitment, we've got solid concept. Here's why I think it will work. Here's how we exist. We're not disruptive. I don't want to take away your Olympic aspirations. In fact, I think the Olympics is the greatest thing that ever happened to triathlon. So I want to make sure the ITU is comfortable, that we still see them as a governing body. I just wanted to create a framework for professionalism, which brought new players to the sport of triathlon, presented on television in a way that it's a sports entertainment piece. The non-converted person will watch it and go, okay, that makes sense. It's not too long. It fits within the timeframes of what TV companies are expecting. Yeah. And, mate, when we did it, the TV companies bought it. Boom, we'll go live. We'll go live. Everyone's like, finally. So we were like, wow. So finally you're presenting triathlon in a way that we want to see it. Yep. And before it had always been stuffed down their throat. And, and we went from there. We signed all the athletes. Obviously the Olympics are on, so we're talking to them before the games. And it's a hard process because, they're like, oh, yeah, I've seen it all before, but they really hadn't. And, we took the time to secure them all. And then we were looking at the women's series, and a lot of the women were talking about what they wanted to do post the Olympics with pregnancy and taking time down, and we said, okay, let's focus on our pillars. We want to be the blue ribbon series within the sport, within that space of time. We want to be the professional element of the sport. We want the best of the best. It's sort of like the Champions League of soccer. We want qualification league built, so let's just roll out with the men until our top women are ready. It's because it's closed league. I've only got 25 athletes. So if Gwen and Nicola and these others are pregnant, they're big parts of my series. 20% of my series is gone. So it's better to wait until they're in marquee shape to present them that way. It's good for the sport. So Hamilton Island came along. Australia's a country that understands this style of racing. I knew a lot of the people in this space, and I needed to access great people because I'd never really put an event on of this magnitude. And rolled out with people I knew, and we sat with Chief Entertainment, and they just went, well, yep, we can eat this stuff alive, let's put it together, and it's going to be pretty special. It's I'm excited about it. It's been a tough journey. It's been a learning curve, but for me, the intentions are about leaving. It's not about me and Allegra, but creating an environment within my sport, because in my opinion, these triathletes, and maybe it's me thinking because I'm a triathlete, but are some of the greatest athletes on the planet. The modern Gomez and the Brownlees and even the Birtwistle, and they're way superior than I ever was. Right? And it's a tragedy that we just sit back and allow the sport to fall into a hole, and no one picks it up, and there is no, everyone's like, well, it can't be done. I'm like, well, why don't you apply that same vigour that you did as an athlete? Let's do something about it. Yep. When we launched, a lot of people were like, oh, that's idiotic. Where are the women? Everyone's just wants to throw the shit at you. Right? And so they're like, hey, man, look at what I am doing. Help me. Aren't we all triathletes here? Let's make this fantastic. So at points there, myself, Leonid, Michael, Trent, Shane, the team, Ash, my wife has been, felt like we're alone, right? And you're going along, and then suddenly you're coming about, and everyone's like, oh, wow. Oh, mate, oh, wow. I'm like, Well, thank you. Yeah, I've been talking to you guys for ages. So, it's just, you win some and you lose some, but I just feel like I've got an amazing team. The concept's amazing, and I believe in triathlon.
Yep.
And that's the most important thing. And if this fails, and there's no guarantee it will work, but we believe it has merit, and a lot of the players that are coming to Hamilton Island in response to this first event are major sports players. Alibaba, Hamilton Island have been fantastic. We've got all the players out of Singapore. We've got big Russian investors, big Chinese investors, big Hong Kong investors. They're like, this is the greatest thing ever, right? Like, thank God I understand this. I'm like, oh, my God. But it seems like the old guard are like, seen it all before, dumb. I'm like, okay, mate. So it's, I just do it for the athletes. I think, for me, winning, if this was a race, to win this race would be to see a young Aussie kid in 3 or 4 years, I'm handing over $1 million check to win a series that is global, and it's back page, front page of the Times, back page of the Sport, next or 2 in from the football.
Yep.
It's winning. Like that's for me. That's the Ironman Hawaii right now, because I need to throw my attention and focus into something. I'm just that type of personality.
Well, Macca, I think as a teenager growing through the '90s, watching the domestic series, and obviously the Super League's got its nuances, and it's different
very
again.
similar. It's different, but it's very similar.
But similar. Yep. So not putting it in the same kettle of fish, but that was what attracted us. As a junior, we wanted to be you guys. I know that the fruit of that was the Brad Carlefelts, Luke McKenzie's, the guys that sort of grew up, and Courtney Atkinson's. So I think it's someone that's a lifelong lover of the sport like yourself. I think it's going to be super exciting, mate. So who's the top 3 athletes to watch, Macca?
Oh, you've got everyone. We just lost Johnny Brownlee yesterday, and I think I tweeted out he may be done for the season, which he's panicking about because of Commonwealth Games selection. He was my pick to win it. He'd been training the house down. He was literally supposed to arrive here in Sydney on Monday. He had to pull out of Abu Dhabi, and with him out, I think Richard Murray, Alistair, he's Olympic champion. I think Javier's or Mola. I'm always apprehensive of Javier because this super speed, I don't know if he has. I want to see Jake Birtwistle or the Aussies do well. Yep. I feel this, and maybe it's just nostalgic. I feel that this is Australia's distance. You know what I mean? Like, this is...
Well, many internationals came to try, didn't they?
Totally, yes.
The Aussies were just dominating.
Yeah, and it's just nostalgia when I spoke to Brad Bevan and said, mate, can you come up? He was the greatest ever at this, right? And, Courtney and I just feel like it's our distance. So I'd love to see a young Australian, because what I think this series more than anything to do, will do for the sport, it's non-predictable. Just because you're Alistair Brownlee, you make one mistake. It's mistake-free. Mistake, you're out. ITU and these sort of predictable races that have that time, 2 hours, 3. It's like a marathon compared to 100.
Yep.
You got to get your starts right. You got to get your position right. You got to get your everything has to be right. So to lose is very, very easy. So youth tends to be a big advantage, and young guys that maybe don't have that endurance base yet, they couldn't run a 10. I remember for years Courtney couldn't run that 10K, but he was dynamic at this, can suddenly wipe the floor of an Alistair Brownlee, and how that dynamic will translate after this series into other racing is seen. You may create maybe someone like a Jacob Birtwistle's like, man, I'm beating Alistair Brownlee at will. Why don't I do it in an ITU? Yeah. Why don't I do it at the Olympics? And that's where we see this as a pathway. And we've just gifted gifted's the wrong word. We're trying to create a youth league, because for me it's about inspiring youth to come to sport, like you talked about, seeing it. So we've given young Dan Hoy and Matt Hauser a start.
Oh, awesome.
They'll both be racing in white, the junior kits.
Come on.
So they'll be wearing the red number. Matt's number 33, Dan's number 22. Trans-Tasman rivalry. And they're the two best in the country, best in this region, top 3 in the world right now as juniors. And it's about that exposure and giving these kids a chance, and then we'll lay out the qualification, and it'll be pretty cool. So anyone who wants to support, come up, and it's sold out now, the island, but watch on Fox or watch on superleaguetriathlon.com. It'll be live streamed.
And listeners, we'll drop in all the links there to the show notes, so jump over and and check it out. Obviously be prolific across social media for the weekend.
Join the social media and tell us what you think, because it's not, and I've said this to the athletes and I say it to everyone, it's not about me, right? And everyone's like, Macca's at the front of this, and I'm fine, but the athletes are at the front of this, and I'm not sitting here dictating terms. Say, mate, Macca, you should try this, or this didn't work, or I didn't like this. It's our sport. These are our professionals. Yeah, to some degree, it's not an open slather. We have to abide by or create certain structures, but I want to hear feedback. I want to, it's not, well, I'm doing it this way. I'm very open to it because, as I said, I love and I believe in triathlon, and maybe I'll find out in 5 years that I'm the only one, but I believe in it, and I think this series is worthy and has merit, and these athletes deserve the attention and focus that we're going to give them.
A couple of listener questions. Thanks for your time on this, Macca. Chris wrote an interesting article. This is from Obscure Pirate Jack. Chris wrote an interesting article about racing weight, specifically about his long course weight discoveries. Mm-hmm. What differences are there between ideal body weight composition for long course and short course triathlon? And does the 8% rule apply only to someone who has reached their absolute leanest and lightest, or does everyone still benefit from gaining some weight in the off-season?
My personal opinion is, and we talked about it on the show, is I had to put on weight. So growing up in the sport, there was no real structure to it. We had a national coach who was skinny, light is good, skinny's great, skinny is even better. That was basically the mindset. So I had a horrific diet. I was myself and Craig Walton, as the bigger guys, we would starve ourselves. It was very unhealthy. And it was the great Mark Allen who said, mate, you need to, you have a natural body weight. I think everybody does, a natural healthy body weight, whatever that is. And athletes need to exist, without question, way below that. But you can't stay below that for long periods of time. That's where fatigue comes in. That's where people break. That's where all these things happen. So for me, at ITU racing, I used to race at 73.5 kilos. At Ironman racing, I was 78 kilos. So there was a 4.5 kilo difference. But a lot of that came through putting muscle weight on. I used to get very emancipated. I used to be able to lose it all through here, and even in Kona in 2010, I was 77.7. But it was definitely, it wasn't so much a fat thing for me. It was, I got in the gym a lot. I tried to do different work where you sort of bulk up a little bit, which was against everything I'd learned in ITU. And that, I can only speak for myself personally, because I really only focused on myself. For a bigger athlete, was far superior. If you think back, was perfect for me. If you think back to Jason Shortis, was a big athlete. He was one of the fastest marathon runners. If he could swim, we would have probably seen another Hawaiian Ironman winner. So weight and size was something that I think the bigger athlete had to go. That the smaller athlete can get away with it a little bit more. As for fat, I never really checked fat because I think I carry that naturally. But for me, it was a slow progression to race weight, a focus on getting to that within time. Very much like boxing, I guess, to some degree, and understanding post-race, put it back on. Right, put the weight slowly back on. Don't just go eat junk food and get fat, but come back up to weight. Train a little bit heavier. Don't be so weight conscious and focused. Train a bit heavier, and then implement some strategies to lose weight. But when I came to Ironman, a lot of the times our strategies were 12 months of the year. Don't eat, skinny, and that's what we all broke. A lot of us broke.
So interesting, Macca, as a physio. I mean, one of the things that's normally a contributing factor for people's overuse injuries is their frame weight, and it can be a sensitive topic, and people often dodge it in healthcare. And
Yep.
But it's like, got to jump in there. And when you're looking at peak performance, it's such a delicate balance. Even +4, +5 kilos can be sometimes a major contributing factor for the onset of things like plantar fasciitis. Okay. So it's fascinating on the athlete side. That's all about. And then on the the therapist side, it's about also managing that as well. So it's a critical part of peak performance, isn't it? Getting that right.
Well, I talk to Miles Stewart. It's funny because Miles is now the CEO of Triathlon Australia, and he'll agree. I think we laugh about it. We were technically two fat boys. Like my brother's 110 kilos, my other brother's 100 kilos, and here I am existing as a 73 kilo guy. So and Miles was the same. He's quite a big lad, and we used to get skinny, and we always believed that we had the frame and the composition of a heavier guy that got light. It's like putting a V8 in a smaller car. So we used to get that constant trade-off, but there comes a point where that V8 can blow up the chassis, right? Blow everything up. So you needed to be very, very attentive to that. And in Ironman racing in particular, you needed to make sure that the frame was strong enough to keep you together and carry that fuel in a race.
Fascinating. We mentioned Deke as someone, Deke Stella and Mamonas through the interview. But Deke would talk about he just had this good resilience. Naturally, we could run 240k a week, consistently, and never really succumb to injury. But he's observed over the decades. When I asked Deke in an earlier podcast, the change in Australian performance internationally in the marathon, he's like, he just feels there's less resilience in the bodies these days. So this is fascinating, isn't it?
It's true.
Endless. Macca, Brent65 asks, what are Macca's tips for going deep into the well and suffering during a race to get the most out of yourself mentally?
Get married, mate. He'll teach you how to suffer. No, I'm joking.
Hello, Emma, if you're listening.
I think you need to be able to, I think about this a lot because I had a lady that used to work with me for my entire career, Susan Krafner. She owns a company called Beast Milk, and she's a sports psychologist. She was actually a GP, but she focused her attention and her thesis was on schizophrenia and working with schizophrenics. And she said she sees, believe it or not, a lot of correlations between schizophrenic behaviour and athletes in the way they're very up and down. And we talked about unfolding when I'm in a race. She made me do this test one day, which was perfect, because she said, "Oh, Chris, everyone operates well when they're in an environment like we are now, when they're comfortable. It's how you operate under duress or under stress that defines who you really are as an athlete, right? Like, so everyone's like, yeah, I'm positive, yeah, I'm this, and yeah, I think this, but you can only really, how many times have you asked yourself the question, what was I thinking about in that track session the other day with 200 to go? What was I really thinking about? Right? And I'd never asked myself those questions. So we went down the track one day, said, okay, let's learn about yourself, because I was failing a lot in these Ironmans. And she wanted to know where my head went to when things got uncomfortable, because I always thought I was super positive, driven. So she rode a bike around with me on the track. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a set of 400s. We started doing them a set time and get me uncomfortable. Then we're going to keep running. We're going to get quicker and quicker and quicker. And I'm going to prompt you, ask you things as we're going. All right, but you have to keep up with the bike. So we started going around this track, and I'm like, she's like, how are you feeling? I said, oh, great. What are you thinking? Nothing. When everything's comfortable. Then I started getting uncomfortable, right? And she's like, I'm starting to breathe and get pain. She's like, what are you thinking? I'm like, shut up. What do you think? And she started bumping me a few times. I'm like, Suzanne, and we listened to it after the session, right? It was a very basic thing to do, and I realised how negative I became, right? Like at the start, it's jokes, laughs, haha, this is easy, having conversations, and we're getting uncomfortable, and the concentration starts to come in because you're focusing your attention, and then actually the words that I was saying were always blunt, actually quite negative. Right? Shut up. I fucking hate it. Oh, sorry. I hate it. It was very, very negative, right? And she said, well, that's who you are, right? So what we need to do is repackage how you think. So I want you to start focusing now on the little things you can do in those sessions and concentrate on that parts of duress and what we can do about it. And she said, the first thing I want you to do is smile, Chris. When the pain comes, just... Wow. It's confirmation that you're doing the right thing. So how do you train someone to do that? To get back to the question, first you need to start with who you are when you're under stress, right? And so everyone wants to know the answer. What are you thinking about when you're suffering? Well, what are you thinking about? That's where you start. Understand what type of personality you are, because some people think, oh, I hate this, or I don't want to do it. Most of us tend to go to a negative place. Then we need to change those thought patterns to confirmation. So for me, when it got uncomfortable, she said the first thing we're going to do is confirm that this is where we're supposed to be. This is where great things happen. So confirmation, I'd never done that before. I just somehow get uncomfortable and start focusing on it. So she said the first thing you do is smile, and we go from there. And then we created these folders in my head, take myself to places where I'd had great races or great sessions. She said go through these processes that you only need to unpack for like probably 3 or 4 minutes within a race, and that storm goes away and it'll come back again. But it changed my life.
What year was that, Chris?
2006, 2005.
So this was just before 2007. Yeah. So with some of those thoughts going through...
Changed my life.
2007
Yes, changed my life, without question. Understanding who you are when things are going... So a good test when you go to the track, ask yourself next track session you do when you're uncomfortable, what you're thinking about. And 99% of people go, I don't know. Well, that's that's what you're actually training for.
Yeah.
Everything else is fluff. When you're running good, that's easy, right? No, everyone feels great there. I'm the most positive person in the world. And what I realised, I was the most negative person when the chips came down. And that's basically like playing at the casino. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. If you go the right direction, she's like, we need to own and control that as much as we possibly can and create processes to fix it.
Mate, that's powerful. It's analogous to life, isn't it? The real character shines when
totally.
the tough times come.
And some people naturally have it, and others you have to train that. It's something we don't do.
McCoop 92 says, read Macca's book. It was brilliant. So
You're the one.
Yeah, good on you. So don't think there's any. I've got any unanswered questions. So mate, you've and then David Junior Macca proceeded to said, Macca always makes for a great podcast. So mate, thumbs
on
up.
Your
So
day.
no question.
I told him to ask that question. I got you covered on Hamilton Island.
Macca, just in wrapping on the listener questions, what's a physical challenge for the week for anyone listening in? One thing that they can do this week in training. It can be entry level. It can be very difficult.
Go anaerobic once this week. You know,
anaerobic once.
Yeah. I always think. Well, now I'm so time poor, and I have a much bigger respect for the amateur athlete. As a professional, you got all the time in the world, and I actually laugh at how many speeches I did around the world as a professional athlete to amateurs and talk to them about time management. And any professional that's talking to you about time management doesn't have a clue, because man, when you can do whatever you want when you want as a pro and train, you don't have a job and a family and everything to commit, you've got no right to do it. So I've realised now as I've got older, with time so short, and I want to do something myself, I always try and go anaerobic, once or twice a week. Even if I'm doing an easy run, I may run for 3 minutes hard.
Yep.
It's just a nice physical challenge. So go anaerobic.
Go anaerobic. That's Macca's physical challenge for the week. Listeners, if you take it on, let us know. Hit us up on the social handles, and a bit of video proof will be good too.
Easy.
Thanks for those, Macca.
Too easy.
Legend. Macca, on that note, thanks for hosting me in your home here.
Easy.
Couple of weeks out from the Super League launch, and on behalf of the listeners, myself certainly as a junior triathlete over the years, not a junior anymore, but thanks mate for obviously the years of inspiration. And you said something through our time together today which was, I thought, so apt, and that was you don't realise the impact that you have from a distance sometimes, but absolutely as juniors come through, that's you're setting the benchmark. So mate, thank you for my junior years for that 97 win. I'll never forget that, and for your time today. And mate, let's get behind the Super League and make it the best thing in the sport since the Olympic birth.
Thanks mate, thanks for coming down.
Mate. Thanks.
Cheers.
So there you have it, another episode of the Physical Performance Show. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did in bringing it to you. Macca's a special athlete, and it's not surprising that in 2011, Forbes magazine named Macca the world's greatest athlete. For his return on investment for sponsors, they had Macca as a 20-to-1 outstanding return for any investment that any company made in terms of sponsorship for Macca. He's such a personality, arguably one of the best and biggest brands in the sport of triathlon's history. Certainly, if you enjoyed it, please reach out. Let Macca know on social media @MaccaNow that you've enjoyed it. If you take on Macca's physical challenge of going anaerobic, be sure to let us know on social @Brad_beer or @MaccaNow. If you'd like the show notes, including the finish of Macca in the 2007 and 2010 Hawaii Ironman Triathlon Championships, be sure to jump over to pogophysio.com.au and grab the show notes. If you're yet to leave a review, please leave one. That'd be awesome. And if you'd like to get the Physical Performance Show in your earbuds every week, be sure to hit subscribe from your app, and there it will be every week, ready to go for you. Lastly, if you're into running or wanting your run leg of your triathlon to go to new levels, be sure to pick up my Amazon running and jogging bestseller, You Can Run Pain-Free. It's available in both ebook, digital format, also paperback on Amazon, or inside Australia @pogophysio.com.au online. It's 330 pages, packed full of information and the 5 steps that really will take your running to a new level help you run injury-free, and are therefore at your fastest. It's also now available on Audible or iBooks, so if you prefer to listen, be sure to jump over, pick that up, and get into it, and let me know the outcome of the read or the listen. It's been now enjoyed by almost 5,000 runners around the world, so really appreciate the support of that and the feedback and the change that that's making for the running community, those that read or listen to the book. Coming up next week on the Physical Performance Show, we keep the triathlon theme going. I recently caught up with Australian Olympic triathlete from 2016 Rio Olympic Games, Ryan Fisher. Caught up with Ryan in person at POGO Physio, just a matter of weeks out from the launch of the Super League Triathlon Series. So at the time of release of this episode, it will be literally on the eve of the Super League Triathlon Series. So we will all follow closely to see how Ryan progresses across what's going to be a fascinating 3 days of racing. But Ryan is a unique athlete who has been on and off with his triathlon career. And Ryan shares openly around what it was like falling out of love for the sport, coming back to the sport after a prolonged break where he didn't even get on his bike, and reinvigorating himself to qualify with a fairly short campaign for the Rio Olympic Games. He's a very talented athlete and a great guy to boot, so you're really going to enjoy this look at one of Australia's up-and-coming stars of triathlon, Ryan Fisher. So be sure to tune in next week for episode 49 of the Physical Performance Show featuring Ryan Fisher. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best performance. This has been the Physical Performance Show, and I'm Brad Beer.